It is less than 2 weeks until I will be teaching for the first time in person at a small, semi-local convention. And honestly, I'm nervous. I've put pressure on myself, which only led to me stressing out. Art has always been my outlet, the thing that calms my storm. But sometimes, content creation and painting miniatures feels like more work than actually producing art. I needed to make something to break this cycle, without worrying about how it would turn out. Just let the art guide me. So I turned on the camera, no script, only a tiny spark of an idea, hoping it would grow into something more. A while ago I painted this model. I had planned to make it part of a diorama scene, originally wanting to pull inspiration from a pop-up storybook. But lately I've been really into watching videos of people make these little wooden automaton animals. So I decided to mix the two. I had this little box that I got from the craft store for a few bucks a while ago, and I thought it would be perfect for this. I started to sketch out how I could make this. I've never attempted to make an automaton before, but I had a basic understanding of it and just decided to wing it. The mechanics seemed pretty straightforward. The issue was finding things that would work. I didn't want to run out and grab supplies. I was trying to do this quickly. So I'm challenging myself to only use things that I already have on hand. Just like when I pin models, I'm going to use a small metal rod, but I'm going to keep it long to hold it in place. I found this wooden dowel that I think might have been part of a plant, but it's a good size for the turning rod. And as I was trimming that rod, I quickly realized I didn't hold on to the piece and it went flying after I snipped it. Luckily, it just flew into the corner of my room. I needed something that would go around the rod and be higher on one side. So I found this inside tube of an empty dog poop bag roll, and I'm gonna use that. I didn't have any thin pieces of wood, so I grabbed some cardboard to create a base plate for everything to sit on. Side note, if you didn't know, the dollar store also has tiny cutting mats, which I find is handy for travel or quick cuts like this. Next, I marked a spot and drilled a hole for the rod to go through. This is the part where I wish I had a workbench to do this on instead of my desk. If anyone has any suggestions on an affordable workbench for the garage, please let me know. I sanded down the inside of the hole until it turned without any resistance, and made an indent on the inside for the other end of the rod to sit in place. At this point, I decided not to use the cardboard and instead try out this mesh plastic canvas. I've held on to a few of these from when I was a kid and I used to do embroidery and cross-stitching. I planned on using them for terrain, but I thought it would make a good base for things to stick on. To hold that up, I added these little wooden cubes that I also got from the dollar store. Wood glue would have been a better choice, but I'm working quickly and I just used super glue. I wanted a backdrop, so I cut a piece of plastic card to the size and height that I thought would look good. I rounded one corner where the moon would go, and then I cut out a moon. I used some Model Magic air dry clay to build up the one side of the tube because I felt like it needed to be a little higher. Then I began making the moon, clouds, and using a leaf mold for some trees. Once those were dry enough, I primed them. I'm bouncing around so I can work on some parts while others are drying. I primed the backdrop and started using heavy body acrylics on it. I'm working with soft, fluffy makeup brushes because I don't have any proper painting ones, but they'll still get the job done. I have a little bit of flow medium here to help with blending, but I'm mostly just caking it on thick and swirling it around in circles and wavy motions. This technique works great for oil paints, but it's a little trickier with acrylics. You have to work quickly before it dries, but also be careful not to pull up the bottom layers that aren't fully set yet. So very light pressure is key. I'm really channeling my inner Bob Ross here. Once I'm happy with the blend, I switch to flat brushes to start adding details. You could do this with hobby paints to avoid the texture buildup, but it would take a lot longer and it isn't as fun as swirling paint around, at least not to me. While that was drying, I base coated the clouds. Then I went back to add more detail. It was time for some happy little trees. I moved on to painting the clay pieces. While everything was drying, I went back to work on the box. I needed a tube that the model pin could sit in and help hold it up. The first thing that came to mind was a little plastic brush tip protector. It worked. I stuck the pin through and glued a big wooden button on the end. Now it was time to start putting it all together. I hot glued some popsicle sticks for some more support around the model. I grabbed some dried clay and cut that up to put around the base before switching over to some fresh clay to cover over the mesh. This is definitely looking like a funky craft project, but like I said, I'm only using what I have on hand to make this work. And the magic of it is covering it all up so no one will ever know otherwise, unless they watch this video. I brush primed it carefully not to get any on the model. And I did some brush strokes around the sides because I'm trying to make it seem a little weathered. From there, I wet blended some gray browns and mossy greens on the base, and then glazed a hint of purple in some areas, and left that to dry. I mixed some black paint with some sepia ink, and a little flow medium together to cover the sides with. Then I went back and layered on some more green before dry brushing it with a warm gray. It was time to start putting all the pieces together. After looking at it, I decided to dry brush over the edges again with a bright warm gray. To finish up the backdrop, I did a few details on the moon and clouds, then matte varnished the whole thing before sticking it into place. I felt like this needed one last thing to finish it up, so I cut a piece of watercolor paper and added some of that ink stain to it, wrote the name of the model on it, and carefully lit the edges on fire, and then blew them out. Let go of that little voice that screams for perfection and embrace the inner child who craves to just create. Go make fun things. I love your face. Be excellent to yourself and others. Please like and subscribe. Happy painting.